All right, good evening. My name is Joe Murphy. I'm a lawyer with Allegheny Immigration Group, and this is our weekly live stream. Tonight's topic is asylum claims. I'm going to put you through a basic understanding of how an asylum case works and how it goes. Obviously, I can't put you through law school, but I think at the end of the show, you'll probably have a much better working understanding of the asylum claim, what's at stake, what some of the risks are, where you have your claim, and things of that nature. Before I begin, we have some Allegheny Immigration Group news. Number one is the t-shirts, and that's been an ongoing problem. I used to use overnight service from 4 Imprint, which is great, and the shirts were like that, but these have been in back order for weeks, and people are getting irritated with me. For those of you who've been waiting for the t-shirts, I thank you for your patience. Next thing is online sign-up. Now, there's a post, it might even be the post before this live on the page where I show off the online sign-up we have. This is so people who are doing an immigration through marriage case can put in their information online. They don't have to give the same information on 3 or 4 different forms. They can do it in the privacy and comfort of their own home. And ultimately, when they come in here, we would just have the forms ready for them and their signature. And coming in to sign up is still, of course, the most common method. This information would all be kept private. It's encrypted. It's under password. But there's nice little private links that we can give you. And again, if you want to see what that looks like, just go back on the Allegheny Immigration Group Facebook page. A couple links, a couple posts down, there's a short video about what it looks like in our intake system for those immigration through marriage cases. So we've got some serious proposed immigration litigation. It's stalled, but the orange man isn't giving up easily. There are 2 areas that I'm really interested in. One is the public charge area. And that's where public charge is a concern that someone coming in the United States might not be able to survive in our society without needing lots of public benefits. And the 2 big areas I'm watching are holding it against people that they've used public benefits in the past. That would be like someone who entered as a tourist and started using public benefits here in the United States. And the other one, also of interest in public charge, is people who have medical conditions. And these aren't contagious medical conditions. Those people have an immigration problem for a different reason. That's a health grounds. These are conditions that maybe aren't catching but are still expensive conditions. Someone trying to enter the United States, for example, with cancer that did not have their own health insurance or means to pay for cancer treatment would be inadmissible. And now these aren't the law yet, but they're proposed. There's some pushback, obviously, the courts get involved. But I believe the administration is going to keep pushing, and something in this direction is going to become the law. So I'm keeping my eye on those. The other one is the continuing abuse of asylum seekers. The proposed legislation in regard to them affects their work ability. The high points or low points, depending on how you take that, asylum seekers who want to get a work permit will have to have come in through a port of entry. So the, so to speak, border jumpers, the big worry, they're not going to be able to get a work permit at all. It'll be a longer period to wait, even for people who qualify for these work permits, up from 180 days before you can file to 365. And then, of course, only people who filed for asylum within 1 year will be able to get a work permit based on that. If you're interested in any of these topics, there's more information, there's lives and videos down on the Allegheny Immigration Group face page about all of them. On that note, we're a small outfit. We don't have a big advertising budget, and we rely on people just like you to share these videos. If you find this valuable, I would ask that you share it, even right now, to other groups that you may be a member of that may have members themselves who find value in this information. Please share these videos, ideally now while it's still live. And again, share it to groups that would see it as valuable. Don't share it to a Lego collecting group. That's silly. So what is asylum? Asylum is an ancient political concept. I think the Greeks invented it. Sometimes it's called political asylum, and the idea is that someone persecuted in their own country can apply for protection in another, and in many cases that can be permanently moving to the country. The United States recognizes the right of asylum. That's under our home country law and international laws that we've signed on to through the UN, American common law, and the Anglo-Roman common law of asylum. There are refugees and asylees. Refugees have been designated. We can say that everybody in a particular place or a particular subgroup is being persecuted by definition. Those people are refugees. Asylees are people who apply directly on their own. For those who qualify for asylum, that's called an asylee at that point. They're granted a status, it's A01. After getting that, about a year after getting that, the asylee can apply for a green card and then ultimately citizenship. So it's a very nice path to citizenship. If you qualify, of course, the devil's in the details, because you have to be persecuted in the first place to get it. So that might not be the funnest way to do it. All right, who qualifies for asylum? This is someone who's subject to persecution in their home country on account of membership in a protected group or class. And that means there's 4 types of groups or classes that are entitled to protection: race, religion, political opinion, or social group. So the application is normally filed within 1 year. Applications that are filed after a year are generally disqualified. However, there's an exception to the 1 year rule where conditions in the home country have changed to the point where the applicant for asylum has a credible fear that if he was sent back there or forced to go back there, that he or she might, or credibly has a credible fear, it reasonably would be subjected to persecution. There's another situation where the home country is the same as it's always been, but the applicant for asylum themselves have changed while they're here. Okay, so it's the same country. And an example I commonly give is, well, imagine some country in Central Europe that is known to persecute homosexuals. Now, this is a particular example, but someone from that country comes here for college and then decides that they're going to, or finds, I guess, themselves and is now, openly gay. Well, the home country's always been the same thing, but the person has changed now and would be subject to persecution in that country. So again, it has to be within 1 year, unless either the home country has changed and become more likely to persecute the person, or the person has changed and is more likely to be persecuted in the home country. So what is persecution? Well, it's being treated badly. Governments all over the world persecute people, and that's legitimate persecution. They make people pay taxes, they put criminals in jail, they can draft people into the military who don't even want to be in there. That's not the sort of persecution that would satisfy the standards for an asylum. The persecution has to be on account of, so they have to be picking on someone in one of those groups, the race, religion, political opinion, or social group. So, for example, putting a criminal in jail is legitimate persecution. But if a government were to decide that everybody of a certain religion is by definition a criminal and put them all in jail, that is protected persecution under the asylum law. Making a claim can be simple and it can be difficult. There's an application you have to fill out and that has to be filed. You get a little form back pretty quickly that says you filed, and at that point you're an applicant for asylum. You've got a status. You can't be deported or forced to leave while that application is pending. On that note, filing an asylum claim is more than just filling out a piece of paper. There are, and I've warned about them in other videos that are on the Allegheny page, there are asylum chop shops, puppy mills, whatever you want to call them, and these are asylum hustlers. And they will prey on vulnerable communities, kids that came for the summer work and learn program, people that just don't want to go back, people that want to stay here, people that want to try it. Sometimes they'll charge them a fee, not very much, $1,000 or $2,000, but all these people do is fill out a form. And this is very dangerous. This can not only result in you not getting asylum, it can result in you not being allowed to stay in the United States, you're not being allowed back in the United States. In extreme cases, it can result in being imprisoned. When you file an asylum claim, you have to sign a box that discloses the very serious penalties for filing a fraudulent asylum claim. And a lot of these puppy mills do, in fact, file a fraudulent asylum claim for you. There's no supporting documentation, there's no evidence, there's nothing. And then at some point in the future, you are called down for an asylum interview and it's a bare bones application. There's nothing there and you're not prepared. It's a disaster. So I really caution people against these puppy mills, and it can be hard to identify them, particularly in groups that speak a different language. There's usually someone really charismatic who speaks your language, may have been here for years, maybe a citizen, that will be preying on his own people or hers. And I encourage you to think about some of the things. I have the list of little ways of identifying red flags when you may be dealing with one of these asylum hustlers. Okay, first one is they're not a lawyer. Unless they're some charitable organization that's doing this for free, it should be a lawyer. And that could be a church, that could be a community-based organization, but it shouldn't be just some person at large collecting a fee to fill out asylum forms. That's illegal. It's not an honest practice of law. If you don't know this person's full name, or you don't know where they live or work, or their phone number, these are ultimately red flags. And if these people are involved in these immigration schemes and asylum hustling and stuff like that, they generally don't want you to know their full name, where they live, or have their phone number, because you might report them when you get in trouble. Another classic red flag is they won't sign the application, all right, because they don't want their name handed into the authorities. They want only your name on that, and when this application blows up in your face, they want you to be left holding the bag. So watch out for those asylum chop shops or asylum hustlers. They do prey on communities, and it's really unfortunate. And it becomes very difficult for people like me, and very expensive to hire people like me to undo it later. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I advise you strongly to go, if you're going to hire someone to help you file an asylum application, to hire a lawyer, ideally a member of AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which I am a member of, and lots of people are. If you really need to file for asylum and you really can't afford it, any half-decent lawyer would refer you to charitable organizations that can do this work. They even have volunteer lawyers on staff. And again, there's no need to deal with these chop shops. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happens if you file one of these. Obviously, there are a whole bunch of different fact patterns that could result in the filing of an asylum claim. You've got 4 categories: race, religion, political opinion, or social group, all the different countries in the world, so on and so forth. But there are 2 big, broad categories of asylum application types. One are what are called affirmative applications. That's where someone gets in the country and under no real threat from the United States applies for asylum. They come in lawfully and ask for asylum. That's called an affirmative asylum application. Another category is called defensive asylum applications. And that's generally done where the person is in the country. They may have entered legally and overstayed. They may have entered illegally. Any number of things could have happened. But the United States is seeking to deport them. And in what's called a removal proceeding, that's the legal name for a deportation case, the government is seeking to throw the person out, to have them removed, so to speak. The person to be removed, the defendant, if you would, in the case, that's not really what it is called in immigration law, but the respondent to the removal case says in the middle of the case, okay, well, maybe even I am removable. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here anymore, but you can't deport me because I'm entitled to asylum. So that's asserted as a defense, and that's why it's called a defensive asylum claim, right, as a defense to being deported. We're not going to talk about those today. Today, we're going to talk about affirmative asylum claims. Now, my office is in Pittsburgh. I practice a lot in the Northeast and even Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland. A lot of the cases that I handle are affirmative cases, and those are filed with the Arlington Asylum Office. That's down in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in a city called Arlington. The address is 1525 Wilson Boulevard. They're on the 3rd floor. The Arlington office building is kind of a nice building. It's a high-tech building. It's got a lot of neat features. There are telephone numbers and email addresses and fax addresses that are out there on the internet that are supposedly the Arlington office contact numbers. In practice, I've tried to call them when I had problems or needed something. They're never answered. It's very, very difficult to deal with, to get through to them. If you're going down there for Pittsburgh, it's about a 4-hour drive. If you have a hearing, even if it's an afternoon hearing, I strongly advise going the night before and staying overnight. You don't want to be tired or burn out when you do your hearing. See, there's some restaurants around there. We have the addresses if you need a special diet, and that could be halal, that could be kosher, that could be anything of that sort. There's even a gluten-free restaurant around the corner that we have the address of. Okay, so the stairs in front of the building, I'm not sure if it's handicap compliant, but when you get there, you'll be given an elevator assignment that'll take you up to the asylum hearing place. There'll be a lot of people up there. A lot of languages are spoken. You'll have people from all over the world. Their lawyers, their interpreters, their kids will be there. It's quite confusing, and you might be there for quite a few hours. So I strongly encourage taking some snacks with you. If you've got kids, take an iPad or cartoon books or something to keep them busy. Try and go to the bathroom before you go up there. The bathroom up there it's always a mess. I wouldn't tell you what I'm really thinking about it, but it's shocking the condition that bathroom is in at times. So prepare for a day in the rough, so to speak. There'll be a time printed on your notice, and the people come out. They're called like 7:30 cases, and everybody lines up against a wall on the side of the room there where everybody's waiting. And you go to several service windows. You'll be given a pecking order. You'll also receive an oath form at that time, but you don't sign the oath form there. The asylum officer who's going to interview you is going to want to see you sign that. Let me see if there's anything else interesting. So eventually you get called. The cases are called by the last 4 digits of the alien's alien registration number, or 3. It's usually 3, but if 2 people have the same last 3 digits, they'll use 4, and that's so people's names aren't called out. There are people out there who have the last name Hussein or something like that, or even might be embarrassed. Somebody in another clan heard their name yelled out. So nobody's called by name. Your name won't be yelled out. Just the last 4 of your alien registration number. You want to keep that on your mind. A lot of people don't have that memorized, but that's how they'll call your case. When that happens, the person who called it is the asylum officer there to see your case. You'll meet him. Hello. There's nothing wrong with a little chit-chat here. How about this weather? How about the skins game? But don't get into schmoozing with an asylum officer. For one, it's a waste of time. For two, you run a risk of being evaluated as a manipulative personality type, and that could, in theory, have an adverse effect on the officer's determination of your credibility. So some pleasant chit-chat is fine, but don't get into a lot of this kind of, oh, hi, it's so nervous. That stuff isn't going to work. So don't do the schmoozing. I strongly encourage against that. The asylum officers that work there are amazing. I've worked with different government officials and bureaucrats. Some of them are great. Some of them are, less than par. But the people doing these asylum cases are bright. They're smart. They're insightful. They're thoughtful. They're really great down there. But they're always overworked. It takes years, it's supposed to be like 45 days and you're down there from when you file. But it's taking, in practice, years to get a case, even to that first hearing at the Arlington Asylum Office. So I have some patience with the asylum and the mess down there. They're just really overworked. And they're really nice and good people. I'm always proud. I really have been quite proud. So after you've met the officer, you exchange some pleasantries and no schmoozing. You'll go through a door in the side of the asylum office waiting area. There's a long curving hall. You'll walk past a lot of desks, people typing, different things. On the right side of that hall, it's curving to the left. The desks are on the left. On the right side are the actual individual offices. And ultimately, you'll be in an office with an asylum officer. They're officers of the United States. They're not police officers. There's a lot of people that are scared of police, sometimes rightfully so. I'm not commenting on that, but they're officers of the United States. So when they tell you that they're Officer Jenkins, it's not to scare you, and you shouldn't be scared. They're there to interview you about your claim, to take information in a non-adversarial manner, to respect international law and our law about the treatment of people asking for protection. So, and they will. I've never seen anything other than sterling behavior from the asylum officers down in Arlington. So, but don't let the fact that this person introduces themselves as Officer Jenkins or whatever it may be scare you into thinking you're being intimidated by a policeman. Ultimately, you'll get to the office of that officer. You sit down. So the officer's going to actually explain to you, this is not an adversarial proceeding. I'm not here to beat you up. I'm here to take down information. One of the things that can be confusing in an interview like this is that they're taking what you say down. They're typing it into a computer as you speak. And in many cases, they're looking over at a computer while you're talking. And this can be very off-putting, difficult. Most people are used to taking visual cues in communication from the person's face to see if they're understanding or agreeing or skeptical. That's how communication normally flows between people. So that can be a little bit confusing or discomforting that the asylum officer isn't looking at you at all. They're looking at what they're typing into boxes on the screen. Don't take that personally. That's just the procedure. A lot of the information that you give Even if your case is ultimately denied, will be used by the government to understand country conditions in other parts of the world. On that point, don't hold things back. I'm not saying add or embellish. You don't want to do that either. But there are things that can happen that can be part of an asylum claim that might be very embarrassing. I've heard some just amazing things, the barbarism of the world. Tell them, even if your claim is not approved, the information gets into the federal bureaucracy and can be used to evaluate future claims, country conditions, and things of that nature. So don't hold anything back, and you'll find them asking and prompting you during the interview, anything else, and you'll be telling the story, but typing this stuff down, there's no eye contact, they keep saying anything else. That's because they're aware that people sometimes hold things back, and they want to collect as much information as possible. Don't take that to mean what you've said isn't enough. When they say anything else, that you don't have to add anything. If that is everything, then that is everything. If there's more, give it to them, not only to support your own claim, but because you might help somebody else. All right, so let's see. Before we get too far into how the interview goes, before the officer will interview, he will want to see your identification, your passport, whatever immigration documents you might have. Your lawyer will have to show their identification if they're with you, their attorney's ID card, and so on and so forth. And then the officer is going to have to photocopy those and keep a copy in the file, in the sense that, he has proof that the person he interviewed was you. It's a nice practice to have those photocopies made in advance. Okay, so you'll present both the original document and the photocopy to the asylum officer. He'll look at them, and if they match in his or her estimation, he'll keep the copy and return the original. You will just have saved this person a little bit of time. Simple kindnesses, courtesies, and insight often goes a long way in interpersonal interaction. It's much more professional. Now, at the same time, if this asylum officer suspects that what you handed him or her is a forgery, they're going to keep that original and send it out for forensics. So don't fool around down there with that kind of stuff. If you don't have the documents, you don't have the documents. Let's see, they're going to have to verify your last date of entry in the United States. That'll be on the I-94. Now, they don't issue those anymore, but they used to issue some people. There's probably walking around with old-style I-94s. It was a little white card they tucked into your passport. Now it's all online. You can, I think at Google, look up my I-94. You put in date of entry, your full name, your passport number, and it'll have all your entries and exits in the United States listed, where you did it, what class of admission. If there's if you're a student, there'll be an I-20. That's the documents from the sponsoring educational institution. You should have that with you, that you're still current and good standing with the school. Biometrics can be a problem. Those expire, and this is fingerprinting. I don't remember what the fingerprinting schedule is, but I've seen situations where people were scheduled for a new biometrics a week before their asylum interview. That's not enough time for the Arlington office to know you've complied with the print order. When you go down for a biometrics appointment, wherever that may be, here I think it's on Penn Center, I don't know where they're doing it now, but they'll take your the ASC appointment notice, and they will stamp the back of it, and that's proof that you complied. Take that with you on the off chance that either there wasn't enough time to get information to the Arlington office that you've complied with the fingerprint order, or somebody forgot to put it in the computer. It would be good to have a recently dated biometrics compliance, and again, that's that. They take the notice that you have to come in for printing, and when you comply, they stamp the back with a red ink stamp, and they put the date of your compliance. All right, so then you've dispensed with the preliminaries. There's no schmoozing. You've got the documents. They've been accepted. They look original. What happens next? Well, the officer's going to go over your application for asylum, line by line, to make sure it's accurate. Okay, and that's fine. Don't let that make you feel nervous. You may get a question like, you listed this address, and we have another address that you might have lived at. That could feel adversarial. That could feel like somebody's challenging you, but it's not. It's not intended that way. What they're looking for is, you could have simply forgot it. You could have stayed overnight somewhere. Or you could even say, oh yeah, I remember that. I forgot to put it down. That's fine. But they're really interested in seeing if people are stealing people's identities, using fake identities, and they're looking for that sort of stuff. So if the addresses don't match up, don't have a cow. It's not that big of a deal, but hopefully you've listed everything out on that, and they're going to go over it line by line. They want to make sure that all these things are accurate. They want to clear up any discrepancies. They want to make sure it is in fact your statement and that it wasn't prepared, as I said earlier, by some immigration hustler who preyed on you. They're going to ask you to then sign that oath. Think of some other things. I had some notes here that I'm looking down at, so you'll forgive me. They'll ask you to list out the dates of your names and dates of birth of any children you've listed on the application, a spouse if you've listed a spouse. All this is double checking that this is in fact accurate, that this is in fact your statement and your facts, and again clearing up any discrepancies that there might exist in government records against your application. And as I said, if a discrepancy is noted, don't panic. It can feel like you're being challenged. It can feel like you're being accused of a lie, particularly with the officers making eye contact. If it's true, admit it. If it's not, don't. Lying to the government is always worse than forgetting to tell them something. Because a lie, it then becomes, what else did you accidentally forget? As you get into it, eventually you're going to be telling your story. Again, that's a situation where this asylum officer says, great, we've identified you, the documents all appear accurate, we've kept copies to prove that we interviewed you, you've signed an oath form, they've gone over the entire application, all the names, dates of birth, places you've lived, to make sure it's all accurate, in fact your statement, and truthful. And there comes a point in the interview where you have to tell your story. What happened to you? This can be very emotional. People cry, people get very upset. Don't make things up, but don't hold things back. And those are for the reasons I told you before. The government uses this process not only to evaluate and adjudicate asylum claims, but to collect information that may be used to help someone else in the same situation. So don't hold things back, even embarrassing things. I assure you, from some of the hearings I've been through, they're quite aware of how barbaric the world is down there. I am, and I'm not. I take a couple claims a year, but those guys, they hear it every day. Again, if they're asking for anything else, the anything else question, you don't want to take that to mean you haven't supplied enough. That's just them making sure you feel comfortable to tell everything. I've found where people have something they're not comfortable telling, it's usually the last thing they tell, not the first. So a couple anything else is gently prodding you to, so to speak, spit it out might be the best deal. At the conclusion of the interview, it can be unsettling because that person doesn't grant or deny asylum. They simply collect your information. They may make notes about an evaluation of your truthfulness, but someone else makes the final decision. So they'll really just say thank you to you, and you'll be notified by mail shortly thereafter, although I have seen oddly cases that took quite a while for an adjudication to come through. You're legal until you're either denied or, well, if you're granted, you wouldn't be illegal, but if you are granted, you'll get a notice that your asylum application has been granted. Again, you're classified at that point in A01 asylee. You'll be able to get a green card eventually and then citizenship. If it's denied, you will usually be put into what are called removal proceedings, and that is a deportation. Okay, because having waited a year or two for the hearing to happen, whatever status you entered the United States on has expired by then. So now you're out of status and there's nothing legally holding you here. You were legally in the United States while you were waiting for your application to be adjudicated. Now it's been adjudicated against your favor. So you're out of status and in the country. And they're going to give you notice to appear in immigration court to be deported. Interestingly enough, when you get to immigration court, you get another chance because that's a deportation proceeding, and because you can assert asylum as a defense of deportation, you get to relitigate the entire original case and anything new that's come up in your life in between. So don't, sometimes it's even better to have it in immigration court. Bureaucrats in Arlington, Virginia, and again, I have a lot of respect for them. They may be constrained by policy in a way that judges aren't, and you can develop a case much better in immigration court, in my opinion. Of course, no one starts there because that's a deportation proceeding. But that's the nuts and bolts of it. I didn't get any questions tonight, which kind of, I guess it doesn't interrupt my flow of talking, but sometimes it's nice to have some feedback with the audience. Please do like and share these videos. My name is Joe Murphy. I'm a lawyer with Allegheny Immigration Group. My practice is primarily family and humanitarian immigration. I work all over the, I don't know if you want to call it the Allegheny Valley region, Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland. I'm available. My office number is 412-521-2000. My cell, text, and WhatsApp are all the same number, 412-973-3442. And people write me, text me, call me all the time. You can too. I am here for you. That's why I do this show. It's a resource where you can ask questions and get free, absolutely free legal advice. But that's, I think that's it for tonight's live. That's, again, the nuts and bolts of an asylum claim. If you have anybody has questions, of course, some of these asylum cases are sensitive. There can be embarrassing components. There can be difficulties in the case. If anybody wanted to talk privately about that, feel free to send me a DM on Facebook, a text message. You can call my office. I'm happy to talk to you. But that's all for tonight. I'm Joe Murphy. Thank you.